Greetings and welcome. My name is Narisa Rashid, and I'm the host of today's ASQ Lean Enterprise Division webinar. We hold these webinars once each month, and they are free to all our members. Our webinars are recorded, so previous webinars are available on the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division YouTube channel. Our topic for September 11th is Proven Tips for Successful Root Cause Analysis, and the presenter is Michael Levenhagen. Our topic for today, August 14th, is Project Management Using Visual Management Methods, and the presenter is Frank Woodard. We had handouts that you can download. Frank holds a BS in Engineering Science from Purdue University, a MS in Applied Mathematics at the University of Michigan, and a MS in Industrial Engineering from Wayne State University. Frank worked as a high-tech anthropologist and project manager at Menlo Innovations. He has been a member of Board of Directors of the Institute for Quality and Innovation since 2015. He's an associate with People Grow, past chair of the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division, senior director for engineering and operations in the Advanced Manufacturing Group, an executive consultant with the Cornerstone Consulting Organization. Frank is also a member of American Statistical Association, Systems Dynamics Society, and Project Management Institute. Frank is Lean Bronze certified through AME, SME, and Shingo. I will turn it over to Frank.
Thank you, Narisa, and welcome everybody. Hope your day is going well. This, as Narisa indicated, is a topic on project management using visual management methods. It's a presentation I made at the World Conference in Fort Worth, Texas in May, and we thought we would share it with you, the broader audience, as part of our Lean Enterprise Division monthly webinar series. The learning objectives for this webinar is to initiate a continuous improvement project using Project Charter, and we have a template as part of the handout download for you. There's also a flowchart on visual project management and some work instructions that you can download as well, and we're going to talk through that process with you in developing the planning game and using a project board to manage continuous improvement projects. And then also have a template for project status reporting that we'll go through so you can make periodic reports to the project sponsor and key stakeholders. And we'll just define all these terms as we go through the presentation today. The outline is, first we'll start with the why visual project management, go into the origins, look at the relationship with the plan, do, study, act cycle, talk about a project charter, look at task cards and how they're used to express a work breakdown structure, talk about what a work breakdown structure is in project management terms, go through what we call the planning game and the project boards and how those are used, and then show you the job instruction breakdown that was developed to help train people in this approach. Go through status reporting, and then we'll wrap up with a summary. And we've left some time to answer questions that you may have, and those you can ask using the question feature of the GoToWebinar. Now, this is a rather daunting flowchart, and I apologize for that, but it does contain all of the detailed steps that you go through when you build and maintain a visual project management system. And we'll go through these one by one, just so that you're comfortable with it. I'm not going to go through this particular chart in detail. You may have some questions later we can answer, but the idea and the way I typically do work instructions is to develop a flow chart, and then based on that, go through the step-by-step instructions, and that's how this works. So this is just a resource for you. Again, it's part of the download. So let's start with the why. Why visual project management? And all of it, of course, has to do with how do we get the value that we expect from the projects that we run, the continuous improvement projects. And part of it is making sure everything is visible, nothing is hidden, so that you can quickly communicate the status of everything to everyone who's interested. And enabling continuous learning, providing feedback on performance gaps, allowing people to collaborate so that everybody can see where and when help is needed. This is just an example. We're going to go through this in more detail, but it's a real example from Monroe Bank and Trust. We had an implementation project that came out of a rapid improvement event that we held and identified a number of issues in that particular part of the bank, and we had various activities that needed to be performed to address it. And what was interesting is this method allowed people to really gauge their progress and look at on a week-by-week basis that they were actually able to show how it was a fairly large scope project that when you looked at the charter, it was pretty daunting in terms of how are we going to get all this done. But when you break it down into parts and you share, distribute the work, it wasn't so bad. And so it gave people more confidence. Again, we'll go through how you build this and how it's used a little later in the talk. The origin of visual project management starts with the Toyota production system and visual workplace in a manufacturing environment. Basically, you could see the status of production at a glance and to quickly identify where the issues are and gather the resources quickly needed to resolve any of the problems. I ran into this method when I worked at Menlo Innovations. It's a software development house in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I live. And this set of methods was developed by Rich Sheridan and his team there to manage what they call the software factory. And they were taking basically techniques that were used in manufacturing and
Hello? Nobody can hear them, they're saying. Nobody is able to hear you, they're saying. What should I do? Okay. You're the presenter where I'm sorry. It's like I'm not seeing them. You no, I'm not seeing this today. So something. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing that today. It's a little different. I don't know why. What happened? Shoot, I'm feeling so bad. Let's see what happened. Second. Should I log back in again? What happened to the system? I don't know. Yeah, I can hear you, but they're not able to hear you. That's the problem. They've been asking. Can you hear? Are you there, Frank? Frank? Hello? Frank, can you hear me? Hello? What? I'm not. The system. Nobody's able to hear you. I don't know what happened. It's not saying anything here. They're saying that nobody's able to hear them. The session is being recorded. It says it's not. It's not stopped. It did not start. I can hear you from this phone, but not on that phone. I'm not able to hear you here. Not sure where we went wrong. I'm not able to hear you. I'm not able to see anything that I can fix it from here.
I guess we're just going to have to pull it because it's not working. I don't know what else to do.
I'll restart this. How about that? Should I log out and restart? Okay, I'll log off and start. Thanks. Frank, it says on my system here as attendee, you have muted yourself. I'm not able to unmute you. Oh, okay. Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you, and I think other people can hear me.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
So we had to restart everything. Apologies to everybody, but I think we're back online. And I'm going to continue. I'm just going to quickly review the origins. As I said, started with Toyota Production System and it continued. My experience at Mello Innovations allowed me to take and adapt it to a more general application of quality improvement projects, continuous improvement projects. So we've gone from the manufacturing floor to software development and now to a more general application in project management. So with that, it's all based upon learning, and the cadence that I'm typically experiencing is a weekly cycle where every week planning and estimating is done. Tasks are scheduled, then during the week, people carry out those planned tasks and update their status and make changes. Understand the gaps is part of sort of studying and where people can pitch in and help each other. And then acting is continuing the cycle for the next week to re-estimate and adjust the schedule. Projects need to start with a common understanding of what the scope of work is, what the goals are, et cetera. And we use a project charter for that. And again, an example of the project charter is in the download available to you as a handout. It states the purpose of the project, the value proposition, or why is this project important? Why do I need to spend my time? A lot of the projects that we find that we're doing are very cross-functional, and people involved are subject matter experts that are bringing certain points of view or certain expertise to work together. So it's important the value of the project is expressed. The scope of work, both what is in scope as well as what is not in scope. And the what is not in scope is almost as important, because a lot of times you'll end up with what's known as scope creep, where things will just start adding to the tasks already at hand. And we try to avoid that in order to achieve the project on time. Goals, objectives, targets, things that are, the acronym is SMART, so they're specific and measurable, achievable, and time-bounded. The whole time frame or length of the project is important to be communicated. Now, at this point, when you're writing the initial charter, that's very difficult to estimate typically, but you'll see, in using the planning game, we have a way of developing a much better estimate, and we'll come back and revise the charter based on the results of the planning game. Roles and responsibilities, it's important to know who's expected to do what and what roles various people have to play. And then assumptions and constraints. A lot of times these are not spelled out, but it's important so that you can make visible some of the things that people just assumed. So it's an opportunity to put in writing the various assumptions that people might have with regard to what's the intent of the project, what might be off limits, what might be available. One of the assumptions that I encourage is, particularly on part-time projects, and there are a lot of projects that are part-time, particularly continuous improvement projects, is just how many hours a week do we assume we're going to spend on this, each individual. That's going to be an important element of the planning game. So
Frank,
here
if you don't mind, can I intrude in here?
Yeah.
We have many requests saying that they missed the first few minutes. So if you can just give a brief startup they're looking for. They have many requests. My apologies to everyone here. Somehow we got muted. So thanks, Frank.
Yeah, I'll go back to the beginning. Really, the objectives are to go through visual project management and use the tools presented in the handouts to show how you can use them in your continuous improvement projects that you may be running into. And so this is an outline of what we're covering. This is a pretty busy chart, but it's a flow chart that shows step by step how to build a project board, go through the planning game. And we're going to be discussing this. I'm not going to walk through it step by step. And then we talked about the why associated with project management. The advantage is that It's transparent, nothing is hidden, so it's very visible. Quickly communicates status, enables everybody to learn together and to collaborate when help is needed. And this is just an example which we're going to go through shortly in terms of what a project board looks like. It comes from Monroe Bank and Trust and a specific application we had there. Okay, and then since we've come back online, we've gone through the relationship with the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, talked about the project charter, and this is an example of a project charter. It's somewhat doctored, made up example, but it has the general elements, which includes the time frame I talked about, the scope of work, value proposition, roles and responsibilities. Within the roles and responsibilities, for instance, a sponsor is responsible for allocating resources, communicating status to the key stakeholders. And the key stakeholders are the people that are like peers of the sponsor, that without their help, resources, this project can't get done. The sponsor is the person that has the fire in the belly, I like to say, that really has the most to gain or lose by the achievements this project will contain. A team leader, usually the team leader will work for the sponsor, but not always. But they are responsible for leading the team, scheduling the meetings, allocating the work, facilitating collaboration, things like that. And team members do the work. Stakeholders have a role to make sure that their portion of resources are available, and also to communicate more broadly within their organization what's going on. And then assumptions and constraints, with regard to various elements, the methodology being used, how much time is going to be spent, things like that. So that's an example. You can tailor it to your own specific needs, but it's really important to get this written down and socialized up front so everybody understands what's going on. And not that it can't change, because it will evolve as you learn more, but at least everybody's on the same page. A task card is a way of expressing tasks and breaking it down into pieces. We call it, in project management terms, a work breakdown structure, breaking the work into pieces. Very simple, using cardstock and Sharpies, writing the tasks, each task down. These tasks are generated out of the scope of work and the goals and objectives. So you're always looking to see if you are able to achieve those and what it takes to achieve those, and breaking them down into pieces, numbered sequentially for the purposes of managing them. And then there's always a title and a description. The description captures the intent of what is intended, the scope for that particular task. And an example here is a task card for managing the project. This we use quite a bit. It's a generic card that basically describes one of the roles of the project manager, which is to maintain the schedule, facilitate collaboration, provide coaching, raise issues, and get help from the sponsor and stakeholders, and then update the project status board, which once we have this collection of cards, we put it in this kind of Excel format and have people estimate how long it's going to take for one person to perform this task. And these are increments of time that we've found to be useful. It could be a 2-hour task, a 4-hour task, an 8-hour task, a 16-hour task, or a 32-hour task. Anything larger than 32, it's telling you That's too big, you need to break it down into smaller bites. And so there's an iterative nature of this. Once you go through and everybody uses this, fills it out individually, then we talk about it. And if there's tasks that look like they're going to be too big, we add collectively as part of the estimation exercise, add those tasks to the end, number them, and ultimately the project manager uses the median value for the tasks from everybody for each individual task, and that's what goes on the card. If you notice, there's up in the right-hand corner, there's a duration. That's what's written on the card, and then ultimately is used in the planning game first, and then on the project board. Now this is a picture of the planning game. Again, this is from Monroe Bank and Trust, and it shows that we're using flipchart paper. It's really high tech, I know. But it shows week by week what's going to happen. And effectively, collectively, the team plays these cards. That's where the name planning games comes from, in such a way that you only have so much time. So you got these estimated tasks up in the right-hand corner of each card. And based on the charter, you've assumed so many hours per week. So let's say you've got 5 people on the team, and everybody has agreed that they're going to work at least 2 hours a week on this project. Well, 5 times 2 is 10, okay? So you've got 10 hours to spend every week to get things done. So depending upon the task cards, these cards on the left here, you add up the times, it can't add up to more than, in our case, example 10, okay? In which case you may spill over into the next week and the next week and the next week. And that way you can show week by week what you expect to accomplish in this project. So the purpose is to visually schedule the work, and we keep this planning game posted in the war room, if you will, so that it can be used. And it doesn't require a lot of exotic things. Probably the most exotic aspect of the technology is the reusable adhesive putty. Some use commercially, it's called blue tack, but you need a pretty big wall, but typically it's a conference room wall. And there were plenty of those in the bank and other areas where I've worked. So you sort of dedicate that space to the project. The nice thing about that also is it becomes visible to the rest of the organization, so they can see the kind of progress that is being made. The next thing to develop is the project board itself. And this is what's showing on a week by week basis what task cards are going to be played. So on the left-hand side, you have the day of the week, and it doesn't have to start with a Monday. As you notice, this one didn't. It just depended upon the cadence and the schedule of our weekly team meetings. Across the top is the name of the various participants, team members, and then the cards are played either by the project manager or collectively by the team. The team goes to the planning game, and they say that they strip off that first. Let's go back to the planning game visual. Strip off these first set of cards here, and together figure out how to distribute them. You know, who's going to do what, when during the week for that week. And typically, if it's going to take more than one day, the card is placed on the last day when it's expected to be completed. So this card by Tanya over here on the right looks like it's going to get done on Friday, okay? The other thing you'll notice about this is there's colored dots being used. The dots represent the status of that particular task. The yellow dot, and many of these show a yellow dot on them, means those are tasks that are in process. And in this particular case, you can see Sheila's been on vacation. Okay, she's on vacation up until Friday, and then on Monday she's back and she's got another task to work on. If a task gets completed, like here, there's a task that was assigned to me, and it's got a green dot on it. That means it was done, and that's so visually you can see right away for this particular project, it's just starting really, and there's not a whole lot that's been done. The other feature of the project board is this horizontal line. This is kind of like the line that the vertical line you see in Microsoft Project, but this one happens to be made of red yarn. And it's moved every day by the project manager. So you can show whether this project is ahead or behind or on time by just looking at the cards above the line, and are any of them yellow? If they're yellow, it means that particular task is behind. And if you've got any green cards below the line, that means for that particular area, you're working ahead. And so you can get an immediate sense as to what the status of the project is. Now there's a third color that we typically use, which is red. And that's where somebody is behind and needs help, or needs help for any reason, okay? And that is a signal for other people on the team to step in and see what they can do to help. It could be that they're waiting on something that hasn't arrived when they expected it, or it could be they just don't know how to get done what they thought they could get done. And so it might be a resource issue, I don't know. The other feature or principle at work here is you work on one card at a time. So those people like myself that like to multitask, this is forcing a little discipline that says, look, get that task done, the one with the yellow dot on it, get it done before you start the next one. Okay, now if for some reason you're waiting on something and you can't get it done, then you red dot it and put a yellow dot on the next card. But the idea is to work on one card at a time and get it done. That's again a pretty fundamental principle of project management. So again, the purpose of the project board is to visually schedule the work and to identify who's going to do what and when it's expected to get done. So pretty simple. You got some cards that put cards for the names of the people, cards for the days of the week, the task cards that come from the planning game, and additional space on the wall for that. All of this is kind of integrated into work instructions or the job instruction breakdown sheets that I put together for visual project management. And this is an approach that is part of a larger effort called Training Within Industry, TWI, that comes out of the way people were trained back in World War II. And very effective, shows step by step what needs to get done, the key points associated with what needs to get done, as well as the reasons for those key steps. And so this again is a resource that's available to you as part of the downloaded handouts. And it basically is going through what I've gone through in the presentation, but in a little more detail. Status reporting. Again, it depends upon the cadence, but for me, a lot of these projects have a weekly cadence to them. So a weekly report to the sponsor stakeholders and team, documenting what was done, indicating what the next week of work is going to look like, or I mean, if the cadence is different than a week, it would be the next whatever time period is. And then where help is needed and when. And we have an example of that. Again, it's a template that you can modify, but you can see the various elements, accomplishments, tasks that are behind, and the catch-up plan. It's important to have a catch-up plan, so how you're gonna, if you're behind, how you're gonna catch up, and then the plans for the next week and where help is needed. Pretty simple. So I'm gonna summarize and then we can take questions. But the importance of project management is really to start with the charter to get things started on time, get it right so everybody's on the same page. And the purpose is using the planning game is to collectively, collaboratively get the people involved to figure out how long the project's going to take. Once you've broken the project down into tasks, part of the task card technique, then you lay it out week by week and use the assumptions in the charter to develop that plan. And that plan, then you start every week, the project board gets refreshed. And by the way, if things don't get done, for instance, for that week, they carry over into the next week. So what can happen is you can ultimately start adjusting the planning game as well. So you'll see what the knock-on effect is. For instance, if some of these tasks take longer than you thought. The other thing, remember, each week you're estimating. So you've got another learning loop in there to improve really the visibility of the whole project. And again, it can be communicated to everybody on the weekly status report. So with that, I'm going to thank you, and let's take some questions.
Hi Frank, we have a question I have posted in here. They have posted in here why each team member's task time estimated is required. There are SMEs on teams who might be better or more accurate with time estimation than others and using median for each team member. They want to know why each team member's task time estimation is required.
You know, maybe required is too strong a word, but this is the method that we've used over the years, and it seems to work pretty well because different people have different perspectives on how the work is going to get done. Now, one thing that I didn't mention, but we like to do is pair people up. You didn't see it in this example, but I like to have pairs of people working on tasks because of the nature of the work. A lot of times, you know, you get unexpected things happening, and having a pair of people work together, you end up with a higher quality output. At the same time, you're right. Some people have much better insight and skills as to what it's going to take. And that's where the estimation process also involves dialogue and discussion. So when I say the median is used, it's used, but it's also used as part of the discussion. So if there's something very specific, very technical, that somebody knows what it's going to take, I'd say the discussion captures that, and so it's incorporated into the estimate in that regard. But that way everybody has some ownership into that estimate, and it better insight that way. So the dialogue is almost more important than the actual mechanically filling out the sheet. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Frank. We have some other questions here. A few more we'll take. Some tasks are dependent on others. How do we deal with task chains?
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's where that comes out very strongly in the planning game, because the sequencing, particularly when you do it as a group, those interdependencies will come out. And although they're not formally linked, like you would in a scheduling application like Microsoft Project, they are linked nonetheless, because that's the way the planning game was set up. So you depend on the knowledge of the group to maintain those chains. So that, for instance, if let's say you've got a task where you have to develop work instructions and then train people. Okay, well, the training is very dependent on work instructions. You can't train people without work instructions. So if that one task gets bumped out into the next week, let's say, depending upon how much other work is going to get done in that subsequent week, you may have to bump the training using those work instructions out proportionally. So that is part of that planning game discussion, and that occurs ongoing as part of the facilitating the process.
Thanks, Frank. The next one I would take is, does a team member need to know more than their tasks?
Does a team member need to know more than their tasks? Let's put it this way. I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at, but let me answer it this way. Because it's a shared facility, let's just talk about the project board. Team members that maybe I get my tasks done early. Can I pick something else up or go help somebody who may be behind on this week's task? Or can I pull ahead something from the planning game based on what's available from the next week? So one of the things that, again, this pairing of people helps is broadening the knowledge base of everybody on the team. We almost purposely, in the project with Monroe Bank and Trust, we would change partners. We paired people up and would change partners every week, simply to force people to learn more about some aspects of the wealth management system that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten exposed to. So that's not a direct answer to your question, but in a sense, I'm basically saying, yes, it's important to have that larger perspective. In a lot of ways, visual project management will enable that.
In relation to the task, again, we have one more question here. We have been given a project by the sponsor without a clear solution. How should we go about developing the list of tasks?
That happens a lot, and that's actually a good thing. The risk, I would say, is if you're given a project by a sponsor who has a solution that they want you to come up with that solution, that becomes very difficult a lot of times. So one thing I would say is this is an iterative process. So starting out, if you don't know, for instance, if it's not clear, you've got some research tasks right up front to help figure out what the nature of the scope of the project needs to be. Classically, this is, for instance, in root cause analysis, as you start into solving an issue, let's say a quality issue, you don't know what the root cause is, but the root cause analysis is part of the task. And so coming out of that, you may have to run some experiments, you may have to do some research, you may have to do some benchmarking, and some of that, will become clearer and clearer over time. But I would upfront put some tasks associated with researching various aspects of the project so that then you could develop a better work breakdown structure for the project once those have been completed. So in a sense, I'm talking about a research phase followed by then an execution phase. I hope that helps.
Is there a cloud-based tool that can emulate the project board?
I would guess that there is, and I think I've almost seen something like that, but I personally don't know yet. But I would guess that there is something out there that is something like that. The risk, of course, is if it's in the cloud, how do you make it visible? How, and that's one of the tasks when you have virtual teams, one of the challenges when you have virtual teams, because something like that would be really good for a virtual team, but then somehow they have to keep that in front of them, keep it visible. And in that particular case, it might be good to have sort of a daily check-in meeting where you look at everybody together. You're now located in different locations, right? But look at the same cloud-based application of expressing this project board, for instance, and update it. And that way you stay together. So I think, I'm just guessing that there are some cloud-based solutions. I don't know what they are yet, but I'd be interested, and I don't see any reason why it couldn't be used that way.
We have one more here. What are the benefits that you have seen using this tool over other tools such as Microsoft Project?
I'm gonna, full disclosure, I use them both. So a lot of times, you can take like I have, you could take a photograph and embed it in a report. But a lot of times, some clients really want to see a schedule like you get out of Microsoft Project. So I can see using both, to be honest with you. But the collaborative nature, I mean, I can put a schedule together in Microsoft Project myself and never talk to anybody. You can't really do that with this visual project management and the planning game. And, it forces collaboration. It forces people to see the progress. It reveals the progress being made. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people, when they start on a project, just, they have no idea how we're ever going to pull this off. This seems so big, or, whatever. It's so ambiguous. But by breaking it down into pieces and expressing it in the planning game and the project board, people see how it fits together. And that revelation, I've heard many times people really say that really helped them. And so I'm not sure I don't think you can get that level of involvement using a tool like Microsoft Project.
Today, agile project management is a hot topic coming from bad ICT project management. In my mind, a good visual project plan is agile by definition. What is your opinion?
This came out of that space. You know, Menlo Innovations is an agile shop and has been implementing that for a long time. So yeah, it allows for adjustment, allows everybody to participate. It holds people accountable. I mean, you can't hide anything this way. So I agree.
The task estimation sheet states the estimators of hours for one person working full-time. If the people are working on multiple projects, are multiple cards created to break down the time over multiple weeks, or does the same card carry over weeks to week?
It carries over week to week.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
I mean, in general, that's a signal, however, that you may need to break that down into smaller pieces. So that's, you know, generally speaking, from just basic project management, if you got a task that can't be done within a week period, break it down further.
Is this more effective than traditional project management method using Gantt chart for simple projects and software for more complex projects?
It's hard to answer. I mean, I found it more effective. I think the people that I've worked with have found it more effective than the ways they've managed projects in the past. But you know, to each his own.
What do you recommend for using this visual management approach with global teams where they are distributed across multiple countries and multiple time zones?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The best we've been able to come up with so far, and it's kind of kludgy, I'll be honest with you, is using a shared service like SharePoint or ShareFile or something like that, and taking photographs of the planning game and the project board and posting those and sharing them that way. One thing I'll say that approach helps is keeping a record of progress too. But I don't think we have a good effective solution for virtual teams yet. That's where some kind of a cloud-based solution might be better. Although using GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, something like that, it's also possible to share the status that way as well.
How do you handle SOAP creep when a task comes up against a systematic inherent problem?
Yeah, it's very good. And no set of techniques is infallible with regard to scope creep. You need first to recognize it's happening, right? And that's one of the preventive steps there is to have a good project charter that everybody's talked through and agreed to, and go back to that and say, look at the scope of work in the project charter. Is this included or not? Ideally, you've anticipated this situation and say, this is not in the scope, right? That's the advantage of putting a is not statement in the scope. But even having said that, conditions change, and it may make sense to add something to the scope of the project. For instance, if you're doing root cause analysis and you discover something, you may have to go to an outside supplier or somebody who wasn't originally on the team and get their involvement. Systematically, then you change the charter, update the charter, revise the scope, revise the planning game, revise the project board, and everybody is involved in it, so it's not a surprise, and it's okay as a result. To me, that's not exactly scope creep. That's more of like a scope change order, like you would in a construction project where you have a formal process. it becomes more formal that way.
And this is the last one with respect to time. What about motivating meeting? Are we there, Frank?
Yeah, I'm here. Can I ask?
What about motivating management to do Gembas to the project board rather than reporting?
Yeah, sometimes it's placement of the project board. You know, if you can get it placed in the, depending on how many projects you have, in the same space that management regularly meets in, it almost becomes automatic. But, you know, right up front, it's important as part of the kickoff that the sponsor and stakeholders be present and discuss how important and why this project's important and show their involvement. And so going to Gemba, going to the point at which value is being created, going to the project board and giving them an update is better than a status report that comes through email. But you know, I think you can do both.
Okay, with respect to time, I think we can wrap this up. I would like to thank Frank for taking his time out to share with us some very important and interesting information that can be applied to any business organization and share their real-time application and experience. As I said earlier, Frank's presentation is now recorded and will be posted on ASQ Lean Enterprise Division YouTube channel later this week. I would like to remind you that September's topic is proven tips for successful root cause analysis, and the presenter is Michael Levenhagen. And thanks to everyone for participating in today's webinar, and thanks for your support. My apologies again for the audio system was not cooperative, and I have received a lot of compliments in here, and for those questions that were not answered, we'll do our best to respond back to you as quickly as we can. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you, Nariza. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Frank.